Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I'm your host, Charles Long. With me, as always, is my co-host, editor, producer, co-pilot, gunner, navigator, orator, and podcasting associate, Jacob Gloth. How you doing today, Jacob?
I am swell, Charles. I'm excited. I've got a new pitch. It's called
New Pitch.
The Fifth Corner. You gave me the title, and I'll be honest, this was a tough one. Not because the title was bad, but because it was so good that it made me think through so many ideas. It was very difficult to come up with something that worked well enough.
I thought it was a fun title, too.
It's a good title, but it was hard because I was like, I can't not do this well. It's also definitely a movie title because that's what I did for this one.
Ooh. Yeah.
And I'll be upfront with you. This is definitely my weirdest pitch I've had. This is a
I'm excited.
very weird film.
Is this your Dolphin High School?
No, it's I'm trying to think if you've had one that was you have had one that was like this, but I can't remember what it was called. Maybe you'll remember as I get into it.
But yeah, by the end of the episode, we'll remember.
It's very surreal show.
Yeah.
All right, I'm just gonna jump right into it. I'm not giving you characters; we'll get them as we go. Our Act 1, James Tarkowski enters a corporate headquarters that strangely has a door ringer at the top of the door. He's dressed in a suit for his interview. It's an all-white room with a single marble desk in the middle with a little lady behind it, Evita Alvarez. James goes up to her, introduces himself, and says he's here for the interview. She nods and says that he's to go up to the 7th floor, follow the left hall until he reaches the stairs, and go up until he sees the blue door. And then your interview is the first room on the right. He nods and thanks her and asks if he can have a cup of coffee. She pours him one, but says he probably doesn't have a lot of time, which he laughs at, assuming it's a joke because he's got almost 30 minutes before his interview. But she has a plain, serious look on her face. He ignores the remark and says that he's going to be fine. And he asks how long she's been working here. And she says it's hasn't been too long, and she got the job from her ex-husband's father. She says that it was the least he could do after the accident. James is obviously puzzled by this remark and apologized, saying he didn't know that it was her ex-husband. He assumed that when she said ex-husband, he assumed that they were divorced. She says they are, which confuses James even more. She explains that she grew up in a small town in Argentina. We start to go with the narration here, so we're dreamy effect. We're in Argentina, where she was a young, pretty girl who wanted out of her poor life and her this sad little town that her single mom led. And she skipped town with a traveling writer and went to Buenos Aires, where she shacked up with him in a small apartment, taking acting jobs in commercials while he worked all day and sometimes at night. It wasn't until she tried to surprise him one day with a nice home-cooked meal that she saw him in the market with his wife. She then ditched the apartment and moved to a theater company, staying in the dressing room of the actress that she was the understudy for. The actress's name is Rosie, and so she was sleeping there one night when Rosie came in with her lover, and she had to hide in the closet to avoid them. Once they started, Evita tried to sneak out, but Rosie saw her through the reflection of the mirror and screamed, and the panic knocked over the mirror, which crushed her head like a tomato. The man then screamed, and Evita ran. The cops took him in for murder, and Evita got her place in the show, which became a hit because of the drama around the original actress. On the last night of the show, she met a radio producer that wanted her in his next soap opera series. She agreed, and they shacked up together, and she became one of the leading radio voices in the country. It was as a radio personality that she finally met Senor Perón, a leading man in Argentinian politics. This is when James abruptly stops her and says that she's just vaguely recounting the life of Eva Perón, the famous Argentinian political and social icon, and which the woman denies, but James is really weirded out by the whole exchange, and he looks at the time and says realizes he only has 5 minutes, so he says goodbye, sort of shaking his head, and he runs to the elevator as Evita yells at him to remember to follow the hallway all the way until the stairs. The elevator shuts, and James is shaking his head, confused at the weird, strange secretary that's passing off other people's life stories as her own. He presses the button for the 7th floor and looks in the stainless steel as a mirror so he can fix his hair. And he's suddenly startled by a man behind him who says his hair looks fine. James yelps and turns to see Marcus da Silva, a well-groomed but small man with weirdly small hands and a big head. His hair is perfectly gelled except for a single long strand of facial hair that sticks out like a porcupine. Just like extremely wrong, like 5 inches, just one. He's clean shaven everyone else, but there's just one little dangly hair that's just flopping around in the wind. He introduces himself and asks if James is here for the interview. James nods, and Marcus wishes him luck. James asks what his role at the company is, but Marcus says he's also there for the interview. James obviously apologizes, and Mark says it's okay. And it's always good to have a bit of competition. But now there's it's a very awkward environment in the elevator. So James just kind of staring at the elevator numbers as they go up incredibly slowly. Like it's going like 3, 5 minutes passes 4, 5 minutes passes 5. Like it's a weirdly slow elevator. Marcus tells him, it's a very, very slow elevator, and the 7th floor is higher up than you'd think it is. Very high up, he repeats in a strange, sort of longingly kind of way. James nods awkwardly as Marcus taps his foot. He then says he isn't worried. Marcus says he isn't worried if he doesn't get the job because he's got a plan. James sort of just nods politely, not really wanting to get into the conversation. But Marcus then explains that he isn't even planning on going to the interview, which James is even more confused by, yet he's not responding. He just wants to ignore this guy. He's like, yep, I'm going up to the 7th floor to kill myself, which then prompts a what from James, because now he's confused. Now he's interested in what the hell is going on.
Yeah. Now he's invested.
Now Marcus, he just says he used the job interview as an excuse to dress up in his way to get into a tall building over the main street of the city. That way he can splatter himself all over the sidewalk in front of everyone. James is absolutely horrified, but doesn't know what to say. The man explains that he used to be a painter, and that he spent most of his time in France trying to break into the art scene, but he couldn't get anything to stick. He had a strange style that people didn't like, but it's the only one that he knew. It was the only way he knew how to paint. It was his emotion on a page, and he just didn't know how to do anything else. He explained that one day, in rage, he cut off his own ear just to feel something, anything. That's when James cuts him off and says that he's just, like, looks at his ear. He's like, you still have your ear? Are you just, like, ripping off Van Gogh? Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you lying about this? I can see your ear on the side of your head. Like, why are you making this up? And he yells at him, wondering if he's even going to kill himself, and if it's just some weird, if he's just trying to, like, freak him out before the interview as a way to, like, psych him out.
Put him off his game.
Which, as he's saying this, it becomes clear that on Marcus's face that is in fact what this guy's doing. And James scolds him and tells him he's gonna tell the recruiter about this. And Marcus simply smiles and tells him to make sure that he makes the right turn. James is bewildered and walks down the long hallway in a huff. It's an incredibly long and narrow path that's entirely white. And after multiple angry steps, James questions whether he turned left or right out of the elevator. He turns back but doesn't see the elevator, and no matter how many steps he's gone, it doesn't change. In fact, it feels like he's running on a treadmill. So the carpet, everything, the whole hallway just looks exactly the same. Every step he takes, it doesn't look like he's going forward, but he knows he's going forward with each step. It just seems like it stretches on forever and ever. He starts sprinting, and he runs out of breath, and he sits down, exhausted, getting confused. He reaches in his pocket, but there's a hole in his coat, and his phone has slipped through, so now he's got no way of communicating anyone. He's just confused in this seemingly endless hallway. He looks back and forth, but there's no phone on the floor. It's just hallway, just patterned carpet, white walls, and fluorescent lights. At this point, he's forgotten which direction is the one he's coming through and which one he was running back towards. And he just decides to continually walk until he hits something. He goes and he goes and he goes, but nothing changes. He looks back and for a moment catches sight of something, but behind him where he passed, there's a door. He walks back towards it, opens it, goes in to a small room where a lone man at a desk is typing away on a printer. On a typewriter, sorry. James apologizes and says he's lost and maybe dehydrated or something, and maybe the man in the elevator might have drugged him. And the man at the desk sort of shushes him and points to a chair. James sits down as the man hands him a glass of water, which James drinks quickly, and then another. The man explains that his name is Jordan Jarrett Bryant. He tells him how he used to be a writer, and he spent most of his time writing so that he could try to get a girl. And the girl, he got to like him, but he couldn't get her father on board. He needed to become a successful writer before her father would even bother to look at him. And so he finally, he slaved away. He kept working. He had a very unsuccessful novel, but then after that, he produced something that was actually pretty good. And so he was able to marry this girl, and they ended up moving to to France because it was a little cheaper than New York, and also they wanted to live in France. They wanted to live in Paris, so they were having fun going around Europe. Though the entire time he was very, very nervous about her. He felt like she was always possibly going to cheat on him. He was very self-conscious. He had a bunch of other writer friends, but he was just so enveloped in her and couldn't, separate his own personality from hers. And when she eventually broke it off with him because he was kind of falling out of success and their relationship was so hell-bent on like this, them being so connected and there was no like separation of personality, that he just sort of collapsed at that. And then he went to Hollywood to see if he could try to make some money, selling scripts. He had one famous book a while ago, so maybe people would, give him a job and he could make some money doing that. Yeah. But it's not going well at all. And then James interrupts this guy again because he realizes that this guy is just vaguely recounting the life of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and he yells it for him to stop and sprints out of the room, finding himself not in the hallway, but in a giant, big sort of like ballroom full of massive square blocks. And he turns back to see the door where he had just gone through is now gone. And he is in this massive hall all alone, walking around yelling for help, but there's nothing there. There's no doors. And he starts walking around for a while. These giant blocks are in the middle of the room. He doesn't really know what the hell they are, but they're too big for him to climb on or anything. And that's when he finally notices that there is a door in the room, actually. Except it's not attached to the floor, it's attached to the ceiling. And the ceiling is very high up, so there's not really any way he can get up there. And he's far too short to get to it. And all the giant blocks, as I said, are too tall. And he tries to push them, but they're too heavy. And he's exhausted, and he goes to the corner room and just stares at the whole mess, and he starts crying and yelling, and he throws his hands forward. And as he does, he can feel something brush his hand. And he looks up to see that he moved the blocks when he threw his hands forward from that perspective. Mm-hmm. And he looks and he can see that he can move from this perspective. He can move the blocks with his hands as if they're like right in front of him. And the closer or farther he places the blocks, the larger or smaller they are when he actually goes up to them. And so doing this, he manages to make a stairway out of the blocks. And is able to climb up.
The perspective.
Yeah, it's this whole weird perspective trick. And so he's able to climb up this staircase and climb up through the door. And as he enters the door that's on the ceiling, the perspective switches again. And it's like as soon as he steps in, gravity is now at the floor where he climbed in on, which is, strange. And he enters the room and looks back to see the large, another large hall, except there's people here. And when he turns around, the door where he just came in through, there's no door, it's just more hall backwards. And there's a giant feast. It's full of food, and people are eating and drinking and having a good time. And, he's starving, so he immediately just goes up and starts eating and drinking. And after he gets, his fill of some, roast duck and other crazy feast food.
Other delicious foods.
He's asking people what's going on, but no one's really answering his questions. They're just like, it's the feast, it's the party. I mean, aren't you invited? Like, and as he's asking people what's going on, petals start to fall from the ceiling, and no one seems to even notice the petals. But they're just like small rose petals falling from the ceiling, and it seems cool at first, but then they just keep falling, and they fill up the floor up to his feet, and then to his knees, and then up to his chest. And then he notices that some people are starting to drown in the petals that are just falling from the ceiling. And so he starts to panic, and he's trying to swim up the petals that are now strangling everybody in the room. And he swims up until he beats down a door that's somehow on the ceiling and is swept up by a load of water. And he's swimming in this water and full of petals, and he can't see, and it's just getting pulled and ripped around. And eventually he reaches the surface and finds himself in a giant Olympic swimming pool. Surrounded by families and kids screaming. And he realizes they're screaming because he's stark naked. He panics, gets out of the pool, runs to the locker room where he grabs a towel and finds there's a locker with his name on it. His clothes are inside, completely dry, and he gets dressed and he goes out to apologize, but finds that Once he steps out of the locker room, the pool's gone. He's in a meeting room full of men in suits. Not just any suits, like military officer suits. And there's like Russian guards at the window. There's Russian writing on the wall. He's very confused. One of the guys starts yelling in Russian, and guards rush out shouting and chasing him down the hall, shooting. He runs and runs. And they start yelling for him to drop the briefcase. He's like, briefcase? And he looks down at his hand. He's got a briefcase handcuffed to his hand. It pops open as he's running, and he sees a bomb with a counter going down on the briefcase. He's screaming and yelling, running out the exit door, which leads to a slope of a mountain. Now he's tumbling down the snowy landscape as people yell and gunfire goes off. Other Russian soldiers try to grab or not Russian soldiers, other soldiers grab him and shield him. These guys are wearing different clothing and are fighting the Russians now and are yelling at him to reach the base camp. He doesn't know where the hell the base camp is, but no one will tell him. And he keeps running and running, but the Russian soldiers, they find him near a cliff. And he's, panicking. He's got the counter slowly going down. He doesn't know what to do. He's on the edge of a cliff. There's there's no way out. All of a sudden, a helicopter comes in, starts gunning down the Russians. And they throw down a rope. The rope is like dangling off the edge of the cliff, and it seems like it's just too far for him to make the jump. And they're yelling at him to jump, but he obviously doesn't think he's going to make it. They keep yelling, so he just decides to go for it. He jumps, grabs the rope epically, but it's not connected to the helicopter, so it just slips down, and he tumbles down the mountain with this rope. And he tumbles, it flips and falls down the mountain. And he's laying in the snow, broken and tired, weak. And the bomb is right in front of him. He's watching as the counter slowly goes down. 3, 2, 1, 0. And he closes his eyes. But nothing happens. He just sits there. He opens them to see he's lying on a sofa, and the man in a night suit is sitting in a chair taking notes. James sits up and asks where he is. The man, Dr. Everhart, says that he was just getting to the part where he was talking about the briefcase. James is confused, and the man explains that James was telling him about his dream, which James is slightly comforted by, but still confused. And says he doesn't remember waking up. And the man says that he wouldn't, and that he's a patient that was just like him, with these strange dreams. And he tried all this different medicine and all these different these things to try to fix this patient, but nothing seemed to work. And he ended up taking him to this mental hospital on an island. Because it was the only way that he could, let this guy live a somewhat normal life. But even there, he was just too crazy. The guy kept, he kept thinking he was some sort of detective. And the Dr. Everhart came up with the idea that maybe we let this guy play out his detective fantasy. Maybe that will help him decide how, get out of his dream. If you haven't figured out, we're going to do the whole story of Shutter Island here.
Yeah, I figured that out.
So by the end of the Shutter Island story, James will stop him and says that he's just saying the plot of Shutter Island. And he runs out of the room from this doctor, and he goes to find that he's in a castle that is dimly lit. And he's wandering around the halls to see there's multiple German officers dressed in old clothing. Wait, not old clothing. They are old officers. And in the center is Kaiser Wilhelm II, the king of the First World War German Empire, who says, he tells him to come along for a glass of wine. James is confused because he can understand what Kaiser Wilhelm is saying, despite the fact that it's German. And he's confused why Kaiser Wilhelm wants him to come along and not tell him to get out of the castle. And he looks down, he sees that he's in a German uniform. And he tries to respond to the Kaiser, telling him he doesn't know how to speak German. But he says that in German. And he's like, okay, I can speak German, apparently. And so he has a drink with the Kaiser and his men, who are all well and absolutely wasted. And James doesn't know what to do. And they start having fun until this one big military leader, this one big fat baron, says he's got a surprise for them all, and he leaves the room only to come back in a tutu and start dancing, which confuses everybody. Have this big fat German guy with a big mustache in like a little ballerina tutu dancing in the middle of the room, and as he's dancing, and everyone else is completely silent, he suddenly keels over and dies in the middle of the floor. And James rushes over to help him, but it's no use. And we suddenly switch to him at the funeral for this guy. Then all of a sudden he's in German war meetings, and he's going to his wife and his kids, and he's cautioning the king against the war. And then now he's in the trenches. He's fighting. He's leading men over the top. As he's leading him over top, a shell hits right in front of him and explodes. Most of his men are killed, but he keeps running. He grabs one of his men who's really injured, and he's trying to lead him to safety. But the only close trench is the enemy trench. And so he tears off part of his undershirt, and he waves it around like a white flag to get medical aid. And a British officer waves him over and has his men halt fire. And so James is running with this German soldier who's severely injured, trying to get him to safety. And just as he reaches the British trench where they've got a medical team ready, a young kid in a French uniform who just reached the line spots him and aims. The British officer yells no, but the French guy only speaks French. And the kid shoots him. We hear the ping of his helmet as he closes his eyes. James wakes up back with Dr. Everhart, who he immediately runs away from. He runs past more people yelling for him to listen or hear this or do this or do that. And he keeps running from room to room to room, ignoring, pushing, and shoving past, Roman scenes and World War II stuff and Western stuff, all kinds of random shit in all these rooms, just weird office buildings, all this kinds of stuff. A lot of horror stuff as well. And he's ignoring and pushing and shoving through everything until he finally reaches the elevator. And inside, there's only one button, floor 7. He presses it. This time, he makes sure he turns left. And he goes on and on and on down the hallway until he reaches the stairs and the blue door. He pushes it open to see 2 doors on each side of the room, 2 on the right, 2 on the left. The only problem, Charlie, is he doesn't know which one. He can't remember. Was it the first on the right or the first on the left?
First.
Which is it? He turns back and forth and back and forth. And he looks left. And he looks right. And he looks left again, and the left side's gone. It's just a grassy field. And he looks right, and it's all grass again. He looks around. He's no longer in the office anymore. He's in a big grassy field. And he screams in anguish and starts to cry on the ground. He stays there for a while. Just crying in this big, empty field. Eventually, he pulls himself up, and he keeps walking until he finds a tavern. He goes inside. He listens to the bartender relay the very obvious story of Brutus, as if he was, Brutus. And James is about to tell this guy off as he's looking at the table, and he looks up and he realizes that the guy is Brutus. And he turns around, he sees that he's in the Senate house with him. He's not in the tavern anymore. He's in the Senate house. And Caesar has just come in, and Brutus tells him that it's time, and he hands James a knife. And James is very confused, but he follows the crowd up to Caesar. And he doesn't want to stab him, but Brutus grabs his arm and pushes it into Caesar. And James watches as the light leaves Caesar's eyes. Brutus is holding his head, so he has to look at Caesar's eyes. Wait, no, he looks again. It's not Caesar. It's James. It's himself. And he's watching himself bleed out on the Senate floor, and he starts to cry. He feels helpless, alone, broken. He's crying into his own dead self's robes on the floor, and he hears a voice, and he looks up, and it's Evita, and she asks if he'd like another cup of coffee. And they're in an Argentinian coffee house surrounded by the hustle and bustle of the city, and she tells him that she's breaking up with him, and she's going to go live with Perron. And he pleads with her to stay, but she refuses, and she leaves him. Marcus then...
man. This guy
Marcus
cannot
de
catch
Silva
a break
then comes
anywhere.
in, and he sweeps away with her. So Marcus de Silva is Perron here. James walks out onto the streets and sees it is not Buenos Aires. It's hell. Everything's on fire. Everyone is burning. Demons are running around chasing everyone. He gets captured by a bunch of demons, is dragged away into a dark cell and locked up. He crawls around searching for something, anything he can get his hands on. He clicks the light to illuminate the room, only to find that he's in the elevator. He lights up, and he clicks the 7th floor. He runs down the hall, ignoring all distractions along the way. He reaches the blue door, and he turns left.
Oh.
The camera stays back as the blue door swings shut, and we hear the familiar sound of the door ringing open. That is the 5th corner, Charles.
Mate, that's fucking so weird. I love it. It's so strange. I can't even imagine how you came up with the idea in the first place, but that was really good. I like that a lot.
It was kind of fun to write because it's just new shit has to happen every turn and every
scene, and everybody has to be a liar and recount some sort of either historical or fictional event, right? as if it was their own life, which is a really funny idea.
But then the switch is that later on it is actually the guy. Is actually Brutus.
And then that was great. I liked that. I liked that a lot. That was really fun.
Charlie, did you remember the directions? Did he have to turn left or right at the final?
I thought he had to turn right at the final thing.
You were right. It was right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went the right way.
I would have successfully solved this weird puzzle maze situation.
Yeah.
Not this guy. Not this idiot.
I think if this was to be an actual film script, I'd probably make the directions a little bit more complicated. But I thought you might forget, so I did try to keep it.
Yeah, it's been 20 minutes since you told me, so I feel like it's reasonable that it's just one direction.
Yeah. I would try to make it like it'd be like right, left, and you'd have to, or like left, right, left, right, or something like that. So you'd have to remember the order, which would make it hard. And he would probably do it wrong like twice and eventually get it right or something.
He'd be running around. He'd be, the camera would be really disorientating. I assume like fisheye lens and stuff. So you'd have like all the film nerds online. Like there'd be a whole Reddit thread that like goes in depth into each like shot of the movie just to trying to figure out if he made the right decision at the end.
Oh yeah.
And of course he didn't, because.
And we'll see it from like the opposite perspective, like the other side. So we'll be like, oh, he turned left there. No, wait, it was right on his side. Is it their left or my left? Like which left?
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes down to this binary choice, and you just don't know. And at the end of the day, it's a coin flip, 50-50. Which is fun and really cool and weird. And I'm sure that there is like some deep philosophical, psychological, or social point to all of this, but I am unable to figure it out right now off the top of my head. But I'll be thinking about it, right? Probably something about reflecting yourself in other people or something like that. I don't know. I was really cool though. I really liked that movie, The Fifth Corner.
The Fifth Corner, great title, by the way. I mean, that was
Thank you.
I got to do something really weird for this. It's very, very fun. Who do you want to play in the fifth corner?
Can I play the little man with the big long beard hair?
Marcus da Silva, yeah.
Yeah, I want to play the little man. Or I was thinking also who would be great for that role? Peter Dinklage.
Oh, yeah, he could be.
I don't know if he's actually a little person, but he would be a great Marcus da Silva,
He could be Marcus da Silva.
Or Brutus. I think playing Brutus might be fun. Because Brutus doesn't really talk all that much. He's, just like, come on, stab, look at him, holding his eyes open. That could be fun. That'd be a bit of fun physical acting to do. Well, who do you want to play?
I want to be the Dr. Everhart. I want to recount the story of Shutter Island. And what I really want to go on as like when he starts doing the story, I want it to be very like it sounds like he's talking about a patient, but as it goes on, it becomes like him talking about a movie where he's like, it was really cool, and then this happened, and then that happened. Like it just becomes, it's like your friend talking about a film.
Mark Ruffalo was there, and you're like, what?
You're like, okay, this is insane.
Oh, I had another idea. Could I play the secretary in old lady makeup?
Vita? She's supposed to be young, but yeah, I guess.
Well, I assume that we get like an actual beautiful woman to play her in the flashback situations, and then just to kind of make it a little bit more unsettling, you put me in old lady makeup, right?
Oh, okay.
And, they just look totally different, but, and then I'm the present day Evita. And then we get, I don't know, someone beautiful and young to play past Evita, who's also not real, who's like a fictitious version of herself.
Yeah. I like that.
Which would make sense why I don't look anything like the past Evita. Present Evita and past Evita are totally different looking people. But I really like that movie a lot. I would watch that movie. I probably watched that movie once and be like, that was really good. I didn't get it at all, but it was really good. And then maybe 5 years would pass and I'd be like, I'll watch that movie again. I remember liking it. I mean, like, I remember why I like this movie. I also still don't get it. I have to watch a a 12-minute review on YouTube about it to figure out what the movie's meaning is. You know?
It doesn't always have to have a meaning.
And then I'll watch... No, exactly. And then I'd watch an interview with you that's like from like 50 years after the movie's been made, and you're like, it was fun. It was weird and cool and freaky and kind of gross, you know? It was a fun movie. Why does it have to have a meaning, you big babies?
Now, all the meetings I came up with were usually after I'd finished the... Like, I've got like 2 or 3 in mind, but they're all after I finished the first like draft of this.
That's usually how if I put together a story for this, or just in my free time, the meaning, whatever it is, generally comes to me after. It usually comes to me while I'm recording the show, because I'm talking about it, and I'm talking to you about it, and so we have a bit of a back and forth. Yeah. And that lets me kind of, like, dig into it a little bit more, you know?
Yeah, because you, like, subconsciously put it in as you're writing it, and you don't even realize. Yeah. Or, like, you don't even realize that you, like, oh, shit, this actually works really well with this idea.
Yeah. Well, it's like with Jimmy King, right? All the Jimmy King stuff, I realized that there was a character through line, right? Like Jimmy King's arc throughout all of the shows he's been in, you know? They all lead to somewhere, and I didn't realize that when I was coming up with the stories. It just sort of slotted in that way. So, yeah. But I really like the fifth corner. Give me, now it's time for my title. Oh, okay. I am, what?
I've got my list here.
Yeah. You told me number 2 was going to be the really difficult one, and so I'm going to go number 2. Okay. So, well, then I'll go, how many are there now? 4?
There are 5. I've added 2.
5. I'm going to go number 4. Give me number 4.
Sunday Driver.
Come on. Sunday Driver. That's not a bad title at all. I think I could do that. It'll be about a criminal.
That's probably the simplest one on the list. I was really hoping you'd pick 2 or 3.
Nah, I'll keep dodging and weaving it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for your pitch, Jake, and thank you, everyone, for listening to the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I've been your host, Charles Long. With me, as always, has been my co-host, editor, producer, co-pilot, gunner, navigator, orator, and podcasting associate, Jacob Gloth. If you like what you heard here and you want to hear more, please give us a like, a follow, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog, tell your cat, and remember, we will be back here next week with a brand new televisual series for you to imagine and enjoy, or maybe a movie. It was a movie this week, but next week it probably won't be a movie, but it might be. I don't know. Ooh. Haven't decided yet.
Maybe.
You know, it was a movie last week too. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll do movies too. I mean, we have been doing movies too for years now, but still. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye.